The myth of human warriors. The story said humans were myths. Long ago, they were known as warriors without fear, fighters who protected worlds from darkness. But after the Great War, they'd vanished like smoke. Guerilla never believed the stories. She was a young soldier of the Trelexi race, trained to fight from the age of 6. Her people were logical, not superstitious. Myths had no place on Kairos Prime. Humans were just bedtime tales for children. Until the day she saw one with her own eyes. The sky above the capital city turned red as enemy warships filled the horizon. The Skarn Dominion had arrived. The ground shook under heavy footsteps as metal-clad soldiers spread through the streets like a plague. The Trelexi were losing. Zyra stood on a rooftop, gripping her plasma spear tightly. She was ready to fight, or so she thought. Then she saw him. A lone figure stood in the middle of the street below. His armor was black, scratched from battle. A human face, pale against the dark, was set with a cold, unbreakable stare. The Skarn forces surrounded him, 10 to 1. Zyra's heart raced. No, it can't be. The human raised his weapon, an old projectile rifle, outdated and weak against the Skarn's advanced shields. Zyra expected him to run. Instead, he charged. The fight was brutal. The human moved like a ghost, ducking and weaving between enemy fire. He didn't just shoot, he predicted where the Skarn would move next. Bullets shattered enemy visors. Explosions rocked the street. The human fought with no fear, no hesitation. Zyra forgot to breathe. The human shouldn't have survived. The Skarn were larger and better equipped. Yet, in minutes, their broken bodies lay scattered on the ground. The human turned his head and looked up. Their eyes met. "Run while you can," the human said, his voice like ice. Zyra froze. That was no myth. That was a warrior. The human sprinted away into the shadows as more Skarn soldiers arrived. The invaders shouted orders in their guttural tongue, pointing toward the alley where the human disappeared. Zyra's training kicked in. She leaped across rooftops, following the enemy's chase. "Why am I doing this?" she asked herself. The logical choice was to retreat and report to command. But curiosity pulled her forward. She needed answers. The pursuit led her to the old industrial zone. The Skarn spread out, searching for the human. Zyra stayed hidden. The air smelled of rust and ozone. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from a nearby warehouse. The Skarn charged inside. Zyra climbed a water tower for a better view. From above, she saw the human crouching in the shadows. He waited until the last soldier passed, then silently moved behind them. He's setting a trap. The human planted small devices along the walls and floor. Then he whistled, sharp and loud. The Skarn spun around, raising their weapons. "Come get me," the human said. He sprinted toward the exit. The Skarn followed. As soon as they reached the center of the warehouse, the floor exploded beneath them. The blast shook the tower where Zyra hid. Smoke and fire consumed the Skarn. The human walked through the flames like a figure from a nightmare. Zyra's hands trembled. Myths shouldn't be real. She followed him again. This time, she was more careful. The human moved fast, but she was Trelexi, agile and silent. He slipped into an abandoned building. Zyra landed softly on the roof and peered through a hole. Inside, the human knelt beside a worn-out communication device. His armor was scratched, and a bloody gash ran down his left arm. He activated the transmitter and spoke. "Command, this is Captain Ryan Cole. Skarn forces have taken Kairos Prime. Resistance is minimal. The locals are fighters but untrained. Requesting support, if anyone's left to hear this." Static answered him. The human sighed and wiped the blood from his arm. "Ryan Cole. So humans have names like us." Zyra's foot slipped slightly on the roof. A piece of debris tumbled down and hit the floor below. The human's head snapped upward. In one smooth motion, he raised his rifle and fired. The bullet hit the wooden beam inches from Xyra's face. "Come down," Ryan said, voice sharp. "Slowly." Xyra hesitated. If she ran, he would shoot. If she fought, she would lose. Taking a deep breath, she dropped to the ground. Ryan's rifle remained steady. His eyes, a strange, cold blue, studied her. "A Trilexi soldier," he muttered, "not Skarn. What are you doing here?" Xyra lifted her chin. "I saw you fight. I thought humans were a myth." Ryan's expression hardened. "We were. Until the universe forgot why it feared us." Outside, the distant hum of enemy drones grew louder. The Skarn were coming. Ryan glanced toward the door, then back at Xyra. "You want to live?" "Yes," she said. He tossed her a small device. "Then follow my lead. And don't slow me down." Xyra caught the device. It felt cold in her hands. For the first time in her life, she followed someone else's orders. The human ran toward the shadows. Xyra followed. Behind them, the sky burned, and the myth of human warriors walked again. Cliffhanger. The Skarn drones locked onto their heat signatures. In moments, the chase would begin. And Xyra realized she might have just allied with the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. The Battle of Legends. The night air was thick with smoke as Xyra followed the human through the ruined streets of Keros Prime. Captain Ryan Cole moved like a shadow, silent and focused. His breathing stayed calm, even though blood still dripped from the wound on his arm. Xyra tried to match his steps, but she was unused to running with someone else. Her people fought in squads, moving as one unit. But Ryan fought alone, like a wolf in enemy territory. Behind them, the hum of Skarn drones grew louder. The enemy wasn't giving up. Xyra glanced over her shoulder. The drones glided above the streets, scanning with red, blinking lights. Their metal bodies reflected the burning city like vultures circling dying prey. "Faster," Ryan said, voice low. Xyra tightened her grip on the small device he'd given her. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Out of here," Ryan replied. "But how? They control the city. We don't have air support." Ryan didn't answer. He ducked into an old service tunnel beneath a collapsed bridge. Xyra hesitated, then followed. The concrete walls were cracked, the air stale. Ryan knelt beside a rusted panel and pried it open with a knife. Inside, old power lines sparked faintly. He connected the small device to the wiring. The device hummed to life. "What is that?" Xyra asked. "A gift from the past," Ryan said. His eyes flicked to hers. "Human tech. Simple but effective." Xyra bit her lip. The stories said humans had the best tech. They also said you vanished. Ryan's mouth tightened. "We didn't vanish. We were betrayed." Before she could ask more, the device beeped softly. Ryan stood and motioned her to follow. The ground trembled above them. The Skarn drones hovered closer, their searchlights piercing the night. The two fugitives crept through the tunnel, every step careful and controlled. Xyra's heart pounded in her chest. She hated this feeling, this helplessness. The Trilexi were proud fighters, but tonight they ran like prey. She gritted her teeth and whispered, "Why run? We should fight." Ryan stopped. He turned, eyes cold. "You want to fight 20 drones and an army of Skarn ground troops with one plasma spear." Xyra clenched her jaw but said nothing. Ryan's gaze softened slightly. "We fight when we have a chance to win. Survival isn't cowardice, it's strategy." A loud whir echoed through the tunnel. The drones found the entrance. The machines dropped into the tunnel, red lights scanning the darkness. Ryan grabbed her arm. "Run." They sprinted through the tunnel. Metal claws clanged against concrete as the drones pursued them. Sparks flew as energy beams scorched the walls. The tunnel ended at a rusted ladder. "Climb," Ryan ordered. Xyra climbed fast, her muscles burning. Ryan followed close behind. The first drone reached the base and fired. A beam sliced through Ryan's boot, searing metal and flesh. He grunted in pain but kept climbing. Zyra reached the top and pulled herself into a ruined marketplace. Broken stalls and abandoned carts filled the square. She turned to help Ryan, but he was already pulling himself up. "Go!" he shouted. The drone shot upward through the hole. Ryan threw a small object behind him. The grenade exploded, collapsing the tunnel entrance. Dust and smoke filled the air. The brief victory gave them seconds. Ryan limped forward, favoring his burned foot. Thyra saw his pain but said nothing. The distant whine of approaching Skarn warwalkers echoed through the streets. The ground shook as two-legged machines stomped closer. Their cannons could tear apart stone with a single blast. Ryan ducked into a shattered electronics shop. He crouched behind a counter and motioned for Thyra to stay low. Through a crack in the wall, they saw the warwalkers march into the square. Each one was 12 feet tall, with glowing red optics and twin plasma cannons. Skarn soldiers marched beside them, scanning the ruins. Zyra tightened her grip on her spear. "We can't hide here forever," she whispered. Ryan adjusted the sights on his rifle. "We won't. We just need the right moment." The warwalkers spread out, searching for any sign of life. One Skarn soldier, a massive brute with dark armor, stopped near their hiding spot. Ryan's finger hovered over the trigger. His expression turned calculating. Thyra realized he was reading the enemy's movements, memorizing their patrol patterns in seconds. The Skarn warrior leaned closer to the shop's entrance. Its 4 nostrils flared, sniffing the air. Ryan mouthed, "Wait." The Skarn took another step. It turned its head toward their hiding place. Ryan fired. The shot hit the Skarn in the forehead. The creature collapsed with a metallic thud. "Now!" Ryan shouted. They sprinted from the shop. The warwalkers turned and fired. Explosions shook the ground behind them. Ryan led them into a narrow alley. The machines tried to follow but got stuck between crumbling walls. They emerged into an open plaza. Ryan stopped and pointed toward an old broadcast tower on the hill. "That's our target," he said, breathing hard. Zyra frowned. "Why?" "It's abandoned." "Exactly," Ryan said. "No one's touched it in years, which means its defense systems might still work." The ground rumbled again. From the far street, a massive Skarn tank rolled toward the plaza. Its main cannon glowed with blue energy. Ryan's eyes darted around. He spotted a fuel truck half hidden under debris. "Cover me," he said. He sprinted toward the truck. Zyra positioned herself behind a broken pillar and threw her plasma spear. The weapon crackled through the air, striking the tank's scanner. The machine hesitated for a second, just enough time. Ryan reached the truck and fired at its fuel tank. The explosion roared like a thunderstorm. The shockwave knocked Zyra off her feet. Skarn soldiers were thrown into the air like ragdolls. The tank's cannon melted into twisted slag. Ryan staggered back toward her. His face was streaked with soot, his armor scorched. He extended a hand. "Still think we should have fought earlier?" he asked, breathing hard. Zyra took his hand and stood. "I think you humans are insane." Ryan gave a tight smile. "Welcome to the war." Cliffhanger. But high above, in the Skarn command ship, a figure watched the battle footage. The human's face appeared on the holographic screen. The Skarn commander growled softly. "Find him. Alive. The enemy of my enemy." The sky above Keros Prime was no longer a familiar shade of deep blue. Thick black smoke rolled across the heavens, blocking the stars. Ira followed Captain Ryan Cole through the ruined streets, her heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to question, to make sense of the impossible truth she'd witnessed. But there was no time for questions when death hovered above like hungry vultures. Humans weren't myths. They were real, and they fought like demons from ancient legends. Ryan moved with silent purpose. His limp was more pronounced now. The blast from the fuel truck explosion had injured his foot. Yet he said nothing. The man seemed carved from stone. Grim, determined, unstoppable. "How far to the tower?" Thyra whispered. Ryan pointed toward a distant structure silhouetted against the burning skyline. The abandoned broadcast tower stood like a skeleton, its spire bent and rusted with age. "Another kilometer," he said. "We get there, we might find a working relay. If we're lucky." "Lucky?" Thyra almost laughed. "I've seen what you do. Luck has nothing to do with it." Ryan didn't respond. He simply kept moving, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows. The streets grew quieter as they left the central district. The echoes of battle softened to distant rumbles. Here, in the industrial quarter, the destruction was older. Factories stood like hollowed-out corpses. Conveyor belts rusted in place. Broken transport drones lay in pieces, their circuits long dead. Zyra felt the weight of history here, of a world that had grown soft and complacent after the Great War. Kuros Prime had thrived in peace, convinced the age of violence was gone forever. Now the Skarn were teaching them how wrong they'd been. Ryan suddenly raised a clenched fist. Zyra froze behind him, gripping her plasma spear. The human knelt beside a crack in the pavement and touched the ground. "Footprints," he said. "Skarn. Heavy infantry. 12, maybe 13 of them." "How can you tell?" Ryan ran a finger through the dust. "They carry plasma repeaters. Heavy weapons leave deeper impressions when they walk. Fresh, too, no more than 5 minutes ahead." Sarah shivered. The precision of his observation unsettled her. Her people relied on scanners and drones to track enemies. Ryan used only his eyes and instincts. "Let's take another route," she said. Ryan shook his head. "They're heading to the broadcast tower. Same target as us. If we let them get there first, they'll lock it down. Then what do we do?" He checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left. His jaw tightened. "We ambush them." Zyra's heart raced. 13 heavily armed Skarn against 2 of us. That's madness. Ryan gave her a sideways glance. "No, it's human strategy." The ambush took careful planning. Ryan explained it in short, direct sentences while they moved. Zyra listened closely. The plan was brutal but simple. Surprise the Skarn, force them into a bottleneck, and eliminate them before they could react. They positioned themselves near an old supply yard surrounded by crumbling concrete walls. Rusted containers formed a narrow corridor, a kill zone, Ryan called it. "Stay here," he ordered, hiding her behind a cargo pod. He handed her a detonator connected to small explosive charges he planted along the corridor. "When I give the signal, hit the trigger." "What about you?" "I'll draw them in." "Alone?" Ryan gave a grim smile. "It's what we do best." Before she could argue, he vanished into the shadows. Zyra crouched behind the cargo pod, heart hammering in her chest. Minutes passed like hours. The Skarn patrol appeared, marching with mechanical precision. Their armor glimmered under the dim glow of a nearby floodlight. Then she heard it, a sharp whistle from the darkness. The Skarn froze. Another whistle, this time from the opposite direction. The soldiers shifted nervously, raising their weapons. Their leader barked orders in a guttural language. Then came the shot. The Skarn officer's head snapped back, and it collapsed. The squad opened fire, spraying plasma bolts in every direction. Ryan darted between cover, shooting as he moved. Every shot hit a target. 2 Skarn fell. Then 3. Zyra watched in disbelief. He moved with deadly grace, like a predator toying with weaker prey. Then Ryan shouted, "Now!" Zyra slammed the detonator button. The explosives detonated with a thunderous roar. The corridor collapsed, trapping the Skarn inside. Smoke billowed, and flames licked at the night sky. Silence followed. Ryan limped out of the smoke. His rifle barrel smoked, and his armor was scorched. He gave a small nod. Zyra exhaled and stood. That was incredible. He wiped soot from his face. Told you. Strategy. They reached the broadcast tower shortly after. The base of the structure was overgrown with vines and debris. Ryan found a maintenance door and pried it open. Inside, the tower hummed faintly. The main control console was old, but the power core glowed dimly. Ryan activated the system. Screens flickered on, showing maps of nearby sectors. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the tactical display. Guerilla leaned in. The screen showed Skarn fleet formations orbiting Karos Prime. 3 large cruisers loomed above, but something bigger caught her attention, a massive structure hovering beyond the moon. "What is that?" Ryan's expression darkened. "A planet cracker. Mobile command station. They're preparing to fire on Karos Prime." Zyra's stomach dropped. "Why destroy the planet? They've already won." Ryan shook his head. "The Skarn don't just conquer. They erase." He pointed to the countdown timer. 72 hours. 3 days until planetary destruction. "We need to warn the Trelixi Council," Zyra said. Ryan's eyes hardened. "They won't believe us. The Council thinks humans are myths. If we want to stop that station, we'll have to do it ourselves." Zyra stared at the tactical display. The Skarn fleet was massive. The odds were impossible, but beside her stood a human warrior, a living legend. "Okay," she said, gripping her spear. "What's the plan?" Ryan's eyes glinted with cold resolve. "We go to war." The desperate plan. The broadcast tower hummed softly in the quiet night. Outside, Karos Prime burned. The horizon glowed with the orange rage of a world under siege, and the air carried the metallic tang of plasma fire and melted steel. Inside the control room, Ryan Cole stared at the holographic display. His blue eyes, cold and sharp, locked onto the image of the Skarn planet cracker station hanging in orbit like a mechanical vulture. 72 hours until planetary annihilation. Zyra stood beside him, gripping her plasma spear with white-knuckled intensity. The glow of the tactical map cast shadows across her face, highlighting the worry etched into her features. Her world was 3 days away from destruction. Millions of innocent lives teetered on the edge of extinction. Ryan adjusted the controls, zooming in on the planet cracker structure. The station resembled a massive spiked disk with long metallic arms extending from its core. Energy conduits glowed faintly beneath its surface, channeling power toward its central cannon, a weapon designed to crack planetary crusts and obliterate ecosystems. "We can't fight that," Zyra whispered. "Not with ground forces or air support." The Trelixi fleet was destroyed in the first wave. Ryan tapped the control panel. "We don't fight it head-on. We sabotage it." Zyra gave a humorless laugh. "Just the 2 of us." He didn't smile. "Yes." She shook her head. "That's impossible." Ryan turned to face her. "So was me being real. So was that ambush we pulled off an hour ago. Impossible isn't what kills us. Fear does." Zyra looked at the map again. The planet cracker was enormous, surrounded by Skarn warships and defense platforms. Its hull was reinforced with layer upon layer of armor. But Ryan's gaze focused on a specific section, an exposed maintenance corridor near its fusion core. "Here," he said, pointing to the narrow access point. "That conduit regulates power flow to the cannon. If we plant explosives here, we overload the core and destroy the station." Ryan nodded. "The blast will take out the command center and destabilize the weapon. No more planet cracker." Zyra studied the map, hope flickering in her chest. The plan was crazy, but humans, she was learning, were experts at the impossible. "How do we get up there?" she asked. Ryan activated another display, a schematic of an old military spaceport on the outskirts of the city. "There's a forgotten orbital shuttle there. It's ancient, but Skarn scanners might overlook it. We steal it, fly to the station, get inside, plant the explosives, and get out before the core blows." "Simple," she said dryly. "Simple doesn't mean easy," Ryan said. The journey to the spaceport was a gauntlet of danger. Skarn patrols filled the streets, drones scoured the sky, and warwalkers guarded every major route. Ryan and Sarah stuck to underground tunnels, using abandoned infrastructure to avoid detection. In the darkness of one tunnel, Sarah finally asked the question that had haunted her since she first saw him. Why did humans disappear after the war? Ryan's steps slowed. The silence stretched until she thought he wouldn't answer. We won the war, he said at last. But the peace killed us. She frowned. How? He leaned against the tunnel wall, exhaustion evident in his posture. Humans led the alliance that stopped the Skarn decades ago. We fought hard, lost millions. After the war, the galaxy decided we were too dangerous. The Trilixi, the Vorik, the Coalition, they turned on us. Blockades, sanctions, isolation. Earth's colonies were abandoned. Our fleets were dismantled. Our soldiers became ghosts. Sarah's throat tightened. My people helped do that. Yes. Guilt coiled inside her. I didn't know. Ryan pushed off the wall and continued walking. Doesn't matter now. The Skarn are back, and your people are paying the price for that mistake. The spaceport loomed ahead by dawn. The structure, once a hub of interstellar trade, was now a skeletal ruin. The Skarn had left it largely untouched, thinking it worthless. The shuttle sat on a tilted launch pad, covered in dust and vines. Its hull was cracked but intact. Ryan climbed aboard, running diagnostics while Sarah kept watch. Engines still functional, Ryan muttered. Fuel reserves low, but enough for one trip. Let me guess, Sarah said, scanning the horizon. The launch won't be quiet. Ryan smirked. It'll light up Skarn sensors like a bonfire. Perfect. Ryan retrieved a battered duffel bag filled with explosives. Once we reach the planet Cracker, we'll have minutes before their security responds. Stick close to me. Zira met his gaze. I will. He gave a curt nod. Let's make some noise. The launch was deafening. The engines roared to life, spewing blue fire and shaking the ground. The shuttle trembled, groaned, then shot into the sky. Skarn response was immediate. Drones swarmed from nearby garrisons. Surface-to-air cannons fired plasma bolts that crackled past the ascending craft. Ryan gripped the controls, eyes locked on the horizon. Come on, you old bird, he muttered. Climb. A drone fired, grazing the left wing. Warning lights flashed red. Thyra strapped herself in as the shuttle shuddered. We won't make it, she shouted. Yes, we will. Ryan flipped a switch. The shuttle lurched as emergency thrusters ignited. The sudden burst of speed carried them beyond the atmosphere. The pursuing drones fell away. The black void of space stretched before them. Zara stared out the window. The planet Cracker station loomed ahead. It was larger than she imagined, its central cannon glowing with stored energy. Ryan piloted the shuttle toward the maintenance conduit. Station scanners will detect us soon. When they do, they'll send security teams. We'll have to move fast. Thera nodded, gripping her plasma spear. The shuttle shuddered as it latched onto the maintenance hatch. Ryan opened a side compartment and handed her a lightweight oxygen mask. Once we plant the explosives, we'll use the escape pods to eject, he said. The blast will incinerate everything within 20 kilometers. Zara swallowed hard. Let's not be here when that happens. The hatch opened with a hiss. The station's interior was cold, dimly lit by pulsing blue lines along the floor. The corridor was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. Ryan led the way, rifle raised. They passed through a maintenance hub and reached the power core chamber. The fusion core thrummed like a giant heart, glowing with blinding white energy. Ryan knelt beside the central conduit, unpacking explosives. Zaira stood guard, eyes scanning the door, her body tensed with every distant noise. Ryan set the last charge. Done. He activated the timer. 15 minutes. Now we run. Zaira asked. Now we run, Ryan confirmed. They sprinted back toward the hatch. But as they reached the corridor junction, armored figures stepped from the shadows. Skarn hunters. Their armor gleamed black, and their visors glowed crimson. Plasma rifles aimed at Ryan and Tyra. The lead hunter tilted its head. "Captain Cole," it rasped in broken galactic common. "Our commander wants you alive." Ryan raised his rifle. "Sorry, I'm busy." He fired first. The corridor exploded with light. Plasma bolts tore through the air. Guerilla leaped forward, driving her spear into one hunter's chest. The enemy staggered, gurgling. Ryan gunned down 2 more. The lead hunter fired, and Ryan twisted to shield Zyra. The plasma bolt struck his side. "Ryan." Zyra caught him as he collapsed. His armor smoked, the flesh beneath burned. "Go," he gasped. "Get to the pod." Tears stung her eyes. "Not without you." Ryan shoved the detonator into her hands. His voice was strained but firm. "If you stay, we both die. The planet dies." Footsteps thundered down the hall, more hunters approaching. "Go," Ryan roared. Zyra's breath caught. She squeezed his hand once, then sprinted toward the escape pods. Behind her, the corridor shook with gunfire and screams. She launched herself into a pod and hit the eject button. The capsule shot away from the station. Through the window, she saw the hunters dragging Ryan's body toward the command center. The core charges blinked on her detonator. 030, 029, 028. Tears blurred her vision. The planet's survival depended on that explosion, on her pressing that button. The countdown reached 010. She whispered, "Forgive me, Ryan," and pressed the detonator. The warrior's sacrifice. The planet cracker exploded in the silence of space, its fiery death a brief starburst against the black void. From the surface of Keros Prime, Dyra watched the fireball blossom across the sky. The ground trembled as shock waves rippled through the atmosphere. The explosion signaled hope, the destruction of the weapon that would have shattered her world. But hope came at a cost. Tears blurred her vision as she stared upward. The last thing she saw before ejecting from the Skarn station was Ryan Cole, trapped, wounded, and dragged away by enemy soldiers. The detonator still felt warm in her hand, as though it remembered the choice she made, the choice that killed him. She fell to her knees in the ashes of a ruined city. Guilt crashed down on her chest, stealing her breath. Her plasma spear lay beside her, useless now. What was the point of fighting if the one who gave her the courage to fight was gone? The comms unit on her wrist crackled. Unknown craft detected. Skarn cruiser, moving toward the northern hemisphere. Zyra's eyes shot open. She scrambled to her feet. The cruiser she'd seen escaping the explosion. That was it. The Skarn hadn't retreated. They were regrouping. And if Ryan was aboard that ship, he was still alive. Her hands clenched into fists. If he was still breathing, she wouldn't let the enemy keep him. The Skarn cruiser, Nitrand, soared through the shattered remains of the planet cracker station. Inside, the air smelled of scorched metal and burning ozone. Captain Ryan Cole knelt on the cold deck, shackled to the floor. His head throbbed from a plasma burn across his temple. His wrists were raw from struggling against the cuffs. A low voice echoed from the shadows. "You should be dead." Ryan lifted his gaze. The Skarn commander stood before him. Zelter. The alien's armor gleamed obsidian black, etched with crimson runes of conquest. His reptilian eyes glimmered with curiosity. "Humans don't die easy," Ryan rasped. Zelter's thin lips curved into a predatory smile. "That is what makes you valuable. Your kind once defied the Skarn Empire. We underestimated your instinct to survive. But now your species is nothing but scattered tribes and forgotten colonies." Ryan spat blood onto the deck. "You're still afraid of us. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother taking me alive." The commander's eyes narrowed. "You're more than just a soldier, Captain Cole. You're a symbol, the last human warrior of the old war. If I break you, The galaxy will remember. They will see that humans are no longer legends, just broken relics. Ryan leaned back against the wall. Yeah, good luck with that. Zyra sprinted toward the command bunker in the heart of the capital. The Trilixi Council Chamber was one of the few intact buildings left after the Skarn invasion. Inside, politicians argued in frantic voices, while officers scanned holofeeds. She shoved past guards and slammed her fist onto the central console. The planetary defense chief glared at her. "What do you think you're doing, soldier?" "Tracking the Skarn cruiser," she shouted. "They're regrouping, and they've taken Captain Cole." "Captain who?" the officer asked. "The human." Zyra snapped. "The one who helped destroy the planet Cracker." Murmurs spread across the room. Some scoffed. Others whispered with fear. "Humans are myths," someone muttered. Zyra slammed her spear onto the ground. "They're real. I saw him fight. I fought beside him." She pointed to the scanner. "The Skarn are preparing for another attack. If we don't stop that cruiser, everything we've fought for will mean nothing." The tactical officer hesitated, then tapped the controls. The screen shifted, revealing a Skarn warship descending toward the northern polar region. "Location," Tactired demanded. "Glacier Ridge 7, the officer said. "A hidden base. It's where they launched their ground invasion." Zyra's eyes hardened. "That's where they're taking him." Ryan sagged against the restraints, his strength nearly gone. Zalter had left the room hours ago, leaving 2 guards to watch him. Pain pulsed through his body with every breath. His right arm hung limp from the dislocated shoulder. A soft beep echoed from the wall behind him. He opened his eyes. One of the guards tapped his wrist communicator and spoke in the Skarn tongue. Ryan didn't understand much of their language, but the words Glacier Ridge stood out. "They're taking me to the surface," he realized. "The war isn't over. It's just shifting to ground zero." His mind raced, sifting through every memory of Keros Prime's geography. Glacier Ridge was an ancient research outpost buried beneath miles of ice. The Skarn wouldn't retreat there without reason. Ryan shifted his legs slightly, testing the restraints. His fingers brushed the hidden blade tucked in his boot, overlooked during his capture. His lips twisted into a faint smile. "Sloppy work, Zaltor." He waited. One chance. One mistake from the guards. The nearest guard turned away to adjust a console. Ryan twisted his boot, flicking the blade into his hand. With a grunt, he jabbed it into the cuff's locking mechanism. Sparks flew. The metal restraints hissed open. Before the guards could react, Ryan lunged. He drove the blade into the nearest alien's throat, twisting until the body crumpled. The second guard fired, but Ryan ducked, grabbed the fallen plasma pistol, and shot the alien through the visor. Alarms blared. Ryan's muscles screamed in protest, but he sprinted through the corridor, weapon in hand. Find a ship, get to Glacier Ridge. Stop whatever they're planning. Zyra boarded a stolen Skarn hoverbike and raced across the icy plains toward Glacier Ridge 7. The polar winds howled around her, battering her armor with freezing sleet. Ice shards stretched in jagged peaks under a sky painted with swirling auroras. Her comm crackled. "Lieutenant Zyra, we've detected Skarn troop movements converging on the ridge," said the voice of the defense officer she'd finally convinced to help. "How many?" 2 battalions, and a command craft just landed." Zyra's grip tightened on the handlebars. Ryan's on that craft. The ridge loomed ahead, a massive chasm with a fortified bunker carved into the glacier's face. Anti-aircraft turrets lined the cliffs. Zyra stopped the bike at the ridge's edge and raised her binoculars. Below, Skarn soldiers dragged Ryan toward the base's entrance. He stumbled but didn't resist. Blood streaked his face. "He's alive," she whispered, relief flooding her veins. But relief turned to dread as she spotted Zalter standing on the observation platform. The commander raised his arm, and 2 massive walkers emerged from the base, their plasma cannons humming with power. A communications relay activated beside Salter, and his voice echoed across the ridge. "People of Keros Prime, hear me," Zaltor announced. "You think you've won. You think destroying one station saved your world. You are wrong. My fleet will return, and when it does, we will burn this planet to ash." He gestured toward Ryan. "This human, this so-called warrior, cannot save you. Humans are weak. Their legends are lies." Zyra's hands shook with rage. Ryan stood tall despite the bruises and blood. Even captured, he radiated defiance. "Execute him," Zalter ordered. The guards forced Ryan to his knees, a plasma rifle pressed against the back of his skull. Zyra's heart raced. She only had seconds to act. She unslung her plasma spear, adjusted the power core to maximum, and aimed for the central support of the command platform. One shot, one chance. She exhaled slowly and fired. The spear streaked through the air like a comet, struck the support beam, and exploded in a shower of molten ice and steel. The platform collapsed. Zaltor roared as he fell. Ryan twisted, elbowed the guard, grabbed the fallen weapon, and shot the second executioner. Zyra jumped on her hoverbike and charged down the ridge, heading straight for the chaos. The final stand. The icy winds howled across Glacier Ridge Sun, carrying the metallic scent of plasma discharges and the sharp sting of freezing air. Zyra leaned into the hoverbike's controls, the engine's whine lost beneath the chaos of war. Ahead, the collapsed command platform still smoked, and Ryan Cole was somewhere amid the destruction. But Commander Zalter stood in her path. The Skarn warlord's crimson targeting laser locked onto her chest. His plasma rifle hummed with lethal energy. His eyes, reptilian and cold, tracked her approach. Zyra's heart raced. The hoverbike thrusters strained under her grip. She had no time to dodge. "If I slow down, Ryan dies. If I keep going, I die." Her thumb hovered over the bike's ignition override. An idea formed. A reckless, desperate idea. "Hope you humans are right about crazy plans," she muttered. She twisted the throttle to full and slammed the override. The engine screeched as the bike surged forward. Zaltor fired. The plasma bolt hit the bike's chassis, melting through the frame. Zyra launched herself from the seat a second before the vehicle exploded. The blast threw her through the air. She twisted mid-flight, raised her plasma spear, and hurled it with every ounce of strength she had. The spear crackled through the smoke, spinning like a lightning bolt. Zaltor turned, too late. The spear pierced his shoulder with a sizzling burst. He roared in pain and dropped his rifle. Zyra hit the ice hard, skidding across the frozen surface. Pain shot through her ribs. She scrambled to her feet and sprinted toward the fallen warlord. Zaltor growled, wrenching the spear from his flesh. Black blood steamed in the cold air. His eyes glowed with murderous fury. "You dare," he hissed. "Yeah." Zyra panted. "I dare." The Skarn lunged. Ryan Cole knelt in the snow, wrists still raw from his restraints. His ears rang from the explosion of the collapsed platform. His body ached from burns and bruises, but he was alive. He spotted Zyra fighting Zaltor near the burning wreckage. The alien warlord was twice her size and armed with a plasma blade that crackled with deadly energy. Zyra ducked and dodged, but the warlord was relentless. She can't beat him alone. Ryan searched the ground. He found a fallen Skarn rifle buried in the snow. Plasma cells. Empty. Nearby, a stun grenade lay half buried in ice. He grabbed it, primed the fuse, and threw it toward the fight. The grenade exploded in a flash of blue light. Zaltor staggered, momentarily blinded. "Zyra!" Ryan shouted. She didn't hesitate. She surged forward, drove her spear into Zaltor's knee joint, and twisted. The warlord howled and collapsed. Ryan ran toward her. "You okay?" She gasped for breath, blood dripping down her temple. "Yeah, you look worse, though." "Thanks," he said, offering a grim smile. Zalter groaned, his clawed hand grasping for a plasma pistol nearby. Ryan stomped on the warlord's wrist and aimed the captured rifle at his head. "No more speeches," Ryan said, pulling the trigger. The rifle clicked. Empty. Zalter bared his teeth in a grin. Ryan swung the rifle like a club, smashing the warlord's face. The alien crumpled, unconscious. "That works too," Pexira said. "Yeah," Ryan panted, "but we've got a bigger problem." She followed his gaze toward the horizon. The ground trembled. Skarn warwalkers marched across the ice, accompanied by hundreds of ground troops. Overhead, gunships streaked through the sky, their spotlights sweeping across the glacier. The enemy was converging on their position. The planet cracker was gone, but the Skarn invasion was not over. "Looks like they brought the whole army," Tyra said. Ryan tightened his grip on the rifle. "Then we give them a reason to remember us." The Skarn warwalkers advanced in a V-shaped formation, plasma cannons glowing. At their center rolled a massive siege tank with a triple-barrel cannon designed to shatter fortresses. Ryan scanned the glacier. They had no air support, no heavy weapons, and no reinforcements. Just 2 exhausted soldiers and 1 unconscious enemy commander. "See that ice ridge up there?" Ryan pointed to a jagged overhang on the nearby mountain face. Vizira squinted. "Yeah, what about it?" "Those warwalkers are moving straight through the ravine below it. If we can trigger an avalanche, we bury half their force." "How do we trigger it?" Ryan pointed to a nearby Skarn artillery pod. "With that." Zyra's eyes lit with understanding. "Okay, I'll cover you." Ryan sprinted toward the artillery pod, while Zyra dragged Salter's unconscious body behind a snowdrift and then took up a defensive position. Plasma bolts streaked through the air as the enemy troops opened fire. Zyra ducked behind cover and fired her plasma spear like a harpoon. The weapon crackled through the air, impaling one of the Skarn gunners. Ryan reached the artillery pod. The controls were unfamiliar, but war machines shared common principles. Power source, targeting system, firing mechanism. He powered up the turret and aimed at the ice ridge. The warwalkers spotted him. Their cannons rotated toward his position. "Sci-Fi," he shouted. "I need time." Zira vaulted over her cover and charged toward the warwalkers. Plasma rounds scorched the ice around her as she leaped onto the nearest walker's leg. She jammed a plasma grenade into the joint and jumped away. The explosion blew the walker's limb apart, sending the machine crashing into its neighbor. Ryan focused on the ice ridge. His breath steadied. "Just like target practice," he whispered. He fired. The artillery shell streaked through the air and slammed into the ridge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mountain groaned. A thunderous crack split the sky as thousands of tons of ice broke loose. The avalanche cascaded down the slope, a tidal wave of white fury. The warwalkers tried to retreat, but the ice buried them. Skarn troops scattered in panic as the glacier swallowed their machines. The ground stopped shaking. A thick, icy silence followed. Zyra approached the artillery pod, breathless. That was insane. Ryan exhaled. "Yeah." The comms on the Skarn soldiers crackled with frantic voices. The enemy was in disarray. Ryan knelt beside the unconscious Salter and slapped a pair of wristbinders on him. He activated the commander's comm unit. "This is Captain Ryan Cole," he said, broadcasting on the Skarn command frequency. "Your planet cracker is gone. Your commander is our prisoner, and your invasion is finished." The only response was silence. Zyra watched the horizon, where Skarn forces retreated into the distance. "They're running," she whispered. Ryan collapsed to his knees, exhaustion finally winning. "Yeah, because they know what humans can do now." Hours later, Trelexi's soldiers arrived, securing the ridge and taking Salter into custody. The council broadcast a message of victory across the planet, but Ryan and Syra stood apart from the celebration, staring at the distant stars. "We stopped the invasion," she said. "For now," Ryan replied. "The Skarn won't forget this." Sarah gripped her spear. "Neither will we." Ryan gave her a tired smile. "You fight like a human, you know." She raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment." Ryan chuckled. "Yeah, the best kind." The return of the warriors. The sky over Keros Prime was no longer scarred with smoke. Instead, it shimmered with the gentle blue of a world reclaiming its peace. The ruins still stood, and the ground still bore the scars of war, but the heart of the planet beat once more. The Trilexi people moved through the streets, clearing debris and honoring the dead. In the distance, makeshift memorials lined the city squares. Flowers, tokens, and holographic messages bore a single repeated phrase: "Humanity returns." Zyra stood on the balcony of the newly rebuilt defense tower, staring at the horizon where the Skarn had made their last stand. The ice fields of Glacier Ridge still glittered, but beneath the surface lay thousands of crushed war machines, silent reminders of the battle. Beside her, Captain Ryan Cole leaned against the railing. His face was pale, and his arm was in a sling. His uniform was clean, but bore fresh scars. The medic said he shouldn't even be walking yet, but stubbornness was a human specialty. "People talk about you," Zyra said softly. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "All good things, I hope." "Mostly," she said with a faint smile. "They call you the ghost of the old war. Some think you're a myth brought to life." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "I was never supposed to be a myth. Heroes never are." He fell silent. His gaze drifted to the fleet of Trilexi ships in low orbit. The Skarn were gone, but the galaxy had taken notice. The broadcast of the battle, showing Ryan's defiance and the final collapse of the Skarn lines, had spread beyond the planet. The myth of human warriors had returned to the stars. The Skarn war fleet hovered at the edge of the Yaltris Nebula. Hundreds of ships, sharp and angular, clustered like vultures in the shadows of a dying sun. The central dreadnought, Voidfang, dwarfed them all. Its hull absorbed the light around it, making it a silhouette of darkness against the stars. In the war chamber aboard the dreadnought, Overlord Kirex watched the holographic recording from Keros Prime for the 1000th time. The human soldier appeared again, charging into fire, outmaneuvering Skarn ground forces, and disarming Zalter in hand-to-hand combat. The display froze on Ryan Cole's face, bruised, bloodied, but unbroken. Kyrex's eyes glowed like molten embers. "Humans," he growled. "They are extinct, Overlord," said his adjutant. "Earth was shattered. Their colonies destroyed." The Overlord's clawed hand tightened on the control panel. "Yet one remains, and where one lies, others will follow." He pointed to the galactic map. "Prepare the fleets. We move toward the Sol system." "But Earth is a graveyard." Kyrex's voice turned cold. "We will remind humanity why they went into hiding. We will tear down their myths and scatter their ashes across the stars." Zyra woke to the sound of alarms blaring through the defense compound. The comm unit beside her bed flashed red. She slapped it on. "Lieutenant Zyra," came the breathless voice of the night commander. Long-range sensors detected multiple warp signatures entering the system. "More Skarn?" she asked, swinging her legs out of bed. "Unknown, but the formations match old Skarn patterns. Hundreds of ships." Zyra's chest tightened. "I'm on my way." She dressed in her armor and sprinted to the command center. Ryan was already there, one arm wrapped in a med brace, his face grim. "War's back early," he said. The holographic map showed the Yaltris Nebula. Dozens of red markers blinked into view as the Skarn fleet emerged. The lead dreadnought dwarfed the others. The name Voidfang was etched into its hull in ancient runes. "That's their flagship," Ryan said. Zyra swallowed hard. "It's heading straight for Keros Prime." The comm operator's voice cracked through the speakers. "We're receiving a transmission. Open frequency." "Play it," Ryan ordered. The speakers crackled, then a deep, guttural voice filled the room. People of Keros Prime, I am Overlord Kyrex. You shelter a human, a relic of a forgotten war. Surrender him, and we will spare your world. Resist, and you will burn. The transmission ended in cold silence. Zyra's knuckles whitened around her plasma spear. They're afraid of you, she said to Ryan. Ryan exhaled slowly. Yeah, and when bullies get scared, they try to break you. The council members whispered nervously. Trelixie citizens had long feared the return of such violence. The scars from the Great War ran deep. Council leader Vera turned toward Ryan. Captain Cole, if we hand you over, they might leave us alone. Zyra's head snapped around. You can't seriously consider that. Vera raised a trembling hand. We lost half our population in the last invasion. We have families to protect. One man isn't worth our entire planet. Ryan stepped forward. You're right. One man isn't. Zyra's breath caught. Ryan, no. He raised a hand. But one idea it is. You think this is about me. It's not. It's about what humanity represents. He gestured to the holographic map. The Skarn don't fear me. They fear what I stand for. Resistance. Courage. They fear that if one human stands up, others will follow. He turned to the council. You hand me over, and they'll kill me. Then they'll come for you next. Surrender won't save you. Only fighting back will. Vera hesitated. But we don't have the strength. You have us, Ryan said. And you have the spark of something the Skarn can never kill. Hope. Silence gripped the room. Then Zyra slammed her spear against the ground. I stand with the human. The defense commander saluted. So do I. The room shifted. One by one, officers raised their fists in solidarity. Ryan's jaw tightened with emotion. Okay, he said. Let's go to war. The Skarn fleet descended on Keros Prime like a metal storm. Plasma bolts rained from the sky, scorching city spires and melting through defenses. But this time, the planet did not cower. Human and Trelixie forces united on the ground. They set traps, deployed artillery, and used the icy terrain to ambush enemy forces. Civilian militias fought beside seasoned veterans. At the command center, Ryan monitored the battle. Zyra stood beside him. They're throwing everything they have at us, she said. Ryan's eyes narrowed. No, they're testing us. He pointed to the fleet. The dreadnoughts holding back. That's their real hammer. Then we hit it first, Zyra said. Ryan smiled grimly. Exactly. The plan was desperate. They hijacked an old cargo shuttle, packed it with fusion warheads, and flew it toward the Void Fang. Zyra piloted. Ryan manned the weapons. Skarn interceptors swarmed toward them. Plasma bolts peppered the hull. Shields at 10%. Zyra shouted. Won't matter if we hit the core, Ryan said. He locked onto the dreadnought's command bridge. Come on. Come on. The warheads armed. The shuttle hurtled toward the Void Fang. The dreadnought fired its main cannon. A plasma beam sliced through the shuttle's wing. The craft spun wildly. Ryan wrestled with the controls. We won't reach the core, Zyra shouted. Ryan locked eyes with her. We eject. Manually. Zyra's mouth opened in shock. That's suicide. Survival isn't winning, Ryan said. Sacrifice is. They strapped explosive packs to their suits and ejected into space. The Void Fang loomed ahead, its hull vast as a mountain. They landed on its surface and magnetized their boots. Ryan planted charges along the reactor vent. Plasma turrets opened fire. Zyra threw herself across the hull to block an incoming bolt. The blast struck her side. She screamed, spinning into space. Zyra. Ryan lunged, caught her wrist, and hauled her back. Her armor smoked. Her breathing was ragged. Go, she whispered. Not without you. The turret swiveled toward them again. Ryan activated the detonator. The warheads beneath the shuttle exploded, piercing the dreadnought's core. The explosion spread through the ship, consuming everything. Ryan wrapped his arms around Syra, activating his emergency thruster. The blast wave caught them and hurled them into darkness.